Berg. The King County prosecutor is about to hold a news conference out in Seattle to inform us about the latest on the case involving the deaths of 6 family members in Carnation, Washington. Let's listen.
For an evening of murder. Wayne and Judy Anderson owned a home on several acres near Carnation, and their daughter Michelle lived down the hill from their parents' home in a mobile home that she shared with her boyfriend, her co-defendant now, Joseph McEnroe. Wayne and Judy Anderson had planned to spend Christmas Eve with Michelle and Joseph, as well as their son Scott and his wife Erica and their 2 grandchildren, Olivia, age 6, and Nathan, age 3. Wayne and Judy had expected Scott and his family to arrive sometime around 5 o'clock. Now, while Judy Anderson was busy wrapping Christmas presents for her grandchildren, the defendants were in their trailer, arming themselves with 2 handguns that they had purchased this past summer. We allege that Michelle Anderson armed herself with a 9mm handgun, concealed it in a sweatshirt that she'd wrapped around her arm, and walked up the hill to begin a lethal confrontation with her family. We allege also that Joseph McEnroe was himself armed with a .357 Magnum handgun and was at her side as she headed into the family home. Now, the motive for this crime may never fully be understood, but it appears that Michelle Anderson was angry at her brother Scott, who she believed owed her money. She was also angry at her father Wayne and her mother Judy, apparently over their lack of support for her. As the defendants entered the home, Michelle confronted her father Wayne. We allege that she fired her gun once at her father's head, but missed. McEnroe then stepped in, leveled his gun, and fatally shot Wayne Anderson in the head. Judy Anderson heard those shots and ran from the back room where she had been wrapping Christmas gifts. We allege that she was shot twice by McEnroe, once in the head. Now, for the next 30 to 45 minutes, the 2 defendants prepared for the arrival of Scott Anderson's family. They dragged the bodies of Judy and Wayne Anderson out of the home to a shed behind the house. They used towels and carpets to clean up the bloodstains inside the house, and they burned evidence in a fire pit on the property. Then they waited for Michelle's brother Scott, his wife Erica, and Olivia and Nathan to arrive. Now, Scott Anderson arrived with his family and entered the parents' home, and he was immediately confronted by his sister, Michelle. We allege that Scott Anderson was shot multiple times by his sister and also by defendant McEnroe. Scott's wife Erica witnessed this murder, and she ran for the phone and dialed 911. As she did so, Michelle Anderson shot her sister-in-law twice. Erica was unable to speak to the 911 operator before McEnroe took the phone away and shot her 2 additional times. In this small room, witnessing this horror, was 6-year-old Olivia Anderson and her 3-year-old brother Nathan. We allege that McEnroe spoke to each child and apologized for what he was about to do. The evidence will show that McEnroe then shot each child in the head from very close range. In the span of 1 hour, the defendants had turned this family's Christmas Eve celebration into a scene of mass murder. On Christmas Day, the Anderson property was silent. Now, the investigation into what the defendants did after the murders is continuing, but it appears that they drove first north toward Canada, then south toward Oregon, arriving at neither destination, in an evolving plan to avoid detection. They eventually decided to go back to the property and to pretend to discover the bodies. They may have disposed of the firearms during this time. No guns have yet been recovered. On Wednesday morning, the day after Christmas, when Judy Anderson had not arrived at her post at the Carnation Post Office, a co-worker went out to the home, walked around the locked gate, and discovered the crime scene. Several hours later, while sheriff's deputies were processing that scene, the defendants Michelle Anderson and Joseph McEnroe drove up to the scene in their pickup truck. They claimed initially to be unaware of the murders. After being separated and interviewed at length, the two were eventually booked into jail. Today, we're filing 6 counts of aggravated first-degree murder against each of these defendants. We're alleging the existence of 2 aggravating factors that go along with a premeditated first-degree murder to make the crime of aggravated first-degree murder. First, that there were multiple victims and the murders were carried out as part of a common scheme or plan, or the result of a single act. The second aggravating factor that we have alleged is that in the murders of Erica, Olivia, and Nathan Anderson, that the murders were committed to conceal the commission of a crime, that is, the murder of Scott Anderson, or to protect or conceal the identity of the person committing that crime. If convicted of aggravated murder, the penalty under law is either life in prison without possibility of release or the death penalty. Now, as you may know, the prosecuting attorney has 30 days after arraignment to decide whether or not to file a notice declaring our intention to seek the death penalty. During this time, we review the facts of the case and will consider any mitigating circumstances or any other issues that the defense may want to present to us.
Dan Satterberg, King County prosecutor, a chilling recitation. It hardly needs amplification, but obviously there was planning behind the murder of those 6 family members on Christmas Eve, he says, by the 2 people who allegedly pulled this off, the boyfriend of one of the younger daughters of the family. And the motive, he said, was lack of support from the family and anger over her brother, Scott, who the prosecutor indicated owed her money. But an amazing sequence of events as she was armed with 1 weapon, a 9mm handgun, and Joseph McEnroe was armed with a .357 Magnum, and they methodically went in, allegedly, and shot family members and then waited for her brother to arrive home. And then finally, the last 2 killed were the young children in that home, again, according to the prosecutor, who has now filed aggravated homicide charges, which allows him to file for the death penalty, to seek the death penalty in this case.